Good day, everyone. Welcome to the SharePoint Power Hour presented by Rackspace. My name is Stephen Wilson. I am a Rackspace SharePoint Services Consultant, and today I will be doing our presentation. I am joined by Kevin Hughes. Kevin, would you like to do a quick intro of yourself?
Hi, my name is Kevin Hughes. I'm a SharePoint architect here at Rackspace, based out of Kansas City, and my role here is to figure out all our clients' problems and figure out how to, make them work in SharePoint, fix them up.
And really, when he says all of our clients' problems, he just means the SharePoint ones. Most of our clients have way too many problems for us to address all of them. Today, we're a little bit short-staffed at the Power Hour. Normally, we have about 6 consultants, 6, 7, something. And it's just Kevin and I today. I'm going to be doing a presentation. Probably won't be a very long presentation because it's about, we just got joined by another consultant. Ryan, how about you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi everybody, I'm Ryan Keller, running a little late this morning, but I'm coming to you guys from Colorado, and my job on the team is to make SharePoint a little less SharePointy. I'm the branding guy, and that's kind of my role.
Thank you very much, sir. So as I was saying, we are a little bit short-staffed today, but now we have 3 people. It's like Beard Day here at Rackspace or something. All the bearded members of our teams have decided to show up. As I was saying, this presentation probably won't be extremely long because it's about one of the more basic features of SharePoint, but we've kind of learned as we go on as consultants a couple of things. One, sometimes we forget about the basics. You know, we do stuff with SharePoint all the time, and we get really excited with ourselves when we find some new or innovative way of doing something. When we find a way around a limitation or find some clever mechanism for making something happen, that's what we're excited about. That's maybe what we want to present in a Power Hour. And so we do those sorts of programs. And a lot of times that works out. Some of our highest rated stuff is about more advanced features of SharePoint. Some of our BI presentations by Tavis Lavelle have done very well, but there are some basic pieces of SharePoint that sometimes I think we forget about or we don't give enough press. And recently, when I was talking to Laura, she was saying that she has gotten several questions recently from customers, like at presentations that she's done and things like that, about what the best app to use for a survey would be. And when she says an app, she means the outside pieces that can be brought into SharePoint from the SharePoint App Store. And as she talked to those customers, when they told her what they really needed, she was like, why don't you just use the survey feature that's built into SharePoint? And they simply weren't aware of the feature. It's just one of those things that's kind of in that big list of things when you go into add an app, and it's kind of down there in the list. You have to go a couple of pages in to find it, and a lot of people may not be aware of it. So when we were looking for a topic for this week, that was something that came to mind as a possible target. Just a very simple feature of SharePoint. It has some limitations, and so over time, we have learned as consultants, one of the best ways to get yourself into trouble with SharePoint is to try and stretch it beyond the intended function. So when you try to make SharePoint do things your way instead of doing things the way SharePoint wants to do them, a lot of times that'll lead to little complications that will complicate things like migrations. It'll complicate the user experience. But if you just use it for what it's intended for, a lot of times there are some great features out there that we don't use a lot because we imagine some sort of functionality that we don't necessarily need. We just kind of hoped it would be there. So I'll talk about some of those things with the surveys, as well as just showing you some of the basic points in the survey feature. So give me a second here, and I am going to share my screen. And Ryan, I saw you shaking your head when I said that one of the best ways to get yourself in trouble with SharePoint was to stretch it beyond its intended targets. I imagine you probably are one of the people who hits that most often because you do the branding and the UI stuff, and people are like, "Can you make it do it this way?"
Yes, we've run into that more than once. Can you move all the pieces of the ribbon all over the page? Well,
Exactly.
okay. You might break it, but yeah.
All right, so here I've created a basic SharePoint site collection. I've put a couple of surveys here on the front page. I'm not going to jump straight into the surveys as they are here. This is just a link to the surveys themselves so that I can present them to you when we're ready to show them off. But first I'm going to go into where we're constructing the surveys, and we're going to look at the basic idea of the surveys. So I went in, just simply did add an app. I looked for the word survey, and you can see here it is. You click on that, you give it a name, and then it dumps you straight into the features of the survey. So that's what I did here with this simple survey. I just went in, I created a quick survey, and if I go into the survey settings, this is where you'll see it. And here are my questions that I created really quickly. So if I wanted to add a question, we'll just look at where you can add questions. You can see I've got a whole bunch of different types of questions I can ask. So I type in the question here, and I can allow people to respond with a single line of text. I can allow multiple lines of text. So a single line of text is usually about 250 some characters. I think 255 is that's the default. You can extend that a little bit, or you can do multiple lines of text if you have sort of an essay question. You can do multiple choice questions. So here I've got enter choice 1, choice 2, choice 3. And then I can decide how that's going to be displayed. I could do a drop-down menu, I can have radio buttons, or I can have check marks. If I want people to be able to select more than one thing, I can just use a check mark and then allow whatever. So that avoids you having to have, say option D, all the above. You could have them just check all of the options above that. You can allow a fill-in choice in case there's an option that wasn't in the multiple choice. You can do a lot of the standard data types. You can have date and times. You can do lookups from other lists. You can just have yes/no questions. This puts a page break in. You can put in person or group information. You can pull external data into your survey, and then you can use the managed metadata. And we're not going to explore every one of these options. I'm just going to show you some of the basic setup here of a survey. But you can see right now it's very flexible. It's surprisingly flexible, really, because a lot of the things that people use InfoPath for example, they may actually just want a survey. They just want some questions answered, or they want some data filled in. And even though this says it is for a survey, it could be any sort of information that you want to collect. You could put, questions like, how much did your department spend on paper clips this month? And then you could have them put in a currency amount, and then you could have that information go into the survey. And that allows you to do kind of simple forms for collecting information. It's all collected in the survey, and then you can dump some of the information out, which we'll talk about later. So don't forget that the survey isn't always about just polling for opinion. People can put factual data in here just like they could any other list or library. One of the others I'll show you in a little more detail is the rating scale. This one is kind of interesting because it is a typical survey option where you have, an option from 1 to 5, or I agree, I strongly disagree, those sorts of options. You can do that using the rating scale option in your surveys. So there are all sorts of possibilities here, and it puts all of the data into one place for you, and you can dump that data out in a couple of different ways. So like I said, we'll look at that as we go further on. But right now, I'm just going to show you my simple survey that I created. Very basic stuff. What's your name? Stephen. What is my quest? To find the Holy Grail. What is my favorite color? Blue. And I click Finish. Now if I go in and I look at the simple survey, you'll see now I have one response. Here's the time the survey was created, but if I show all the responses, it was a few seconds ago, it says SharePoint install because that's the account that I'm logged in as. Even though when I look in the response, it asks me what my name is, it still has SharePoint install as the person who filled it out because that was the account that I was logged in as. This starts to show us some of the problems that people have when they use the survey function. And that is, a lot of times people want surveys to be quote unquote anonymous. And if you were to go on the internet, go onto Bing or Google and search for anonymous surveys in SharePoint, you would see a ton of articles about how to do anonymous surveys. And the real answer is there's not a great way to do a truly anonymous survey in SharePoint. And that is where things get troublesome for a lot of people. They really, really want that survey to be anonymous. And so people will go to great lengths. And there are a lot of things that you can do kind of outside of SharePoint itself. You can do things like create specific user policies. You can try all sorts of clever little changes. You can do some pretty, difficult things. But there are a few easy options too if you just want it to be casually anonymous. It's not the kind of data that is going to get anybody in any trouble, but it's just you don't want everyone to know what everyone's answers were. Maybe you want to do sort of a secret ballot so that not everyone knows how people are voting. That kind of thing is fairly easy to do, actually, because I can go into the survey settings and I've got a couple of options. First of all, I can show usernames in the survey results, or I cannot. So that way, I can choose not to show the names, and other people can look at the survey results, but they don't see the names attached anymore. Obviously, if you have a question asking what people's names are, they can fill in something if they want to, but they could also just make up a name, or they could put a number in there, anything. Or you could not have a name blank. That was just one of the questions that I asked. But when it says show usernames here, it means the user that's logged in. So where it was showing SharePoint install, it would no longer do that. The other option that you have here immediately is the ability to have multiple responses. This way, it will track by the person who's logged in whether or not they've already filled in the survey. If you have no here, for example, SharePoint install can't answer this question again. So if I hit save here, and SharePoint install is an administrator. They have full permissions to do whatever they want. But if I go back in here and I click respond to survey, I'm not allowed to respond to the survey again. So it's a quick and easy way to keep people from stuffing the ballot. Unless they have multiple logins in SharePoint, they don't get to answer over and over again. So it's a quick and easy way to do it. Now, can you guarantee it? Not really, because if they do have multiple logins, they could maybe stuff the ballot box. But that's why I said it's for that easy option. It's not really meant as some sort of hardened, foolproof tool. It is just meant for a quick survey. If I look now, you can see created by has some stars next to it. If I view the response, stars. And that way nobody knows who responded here, except for it's Stephen because I put in the name. But I didn't have to ask that question. And even if I did ask that question, I could put any other name in here that I wanted to. So this is the one that actually shows who was logged in when they made the response. That is the easy way to do an anonymous survey. Is it truly anonymous? No. And the reason I say it's not truly anonymous is because I can go back in as the administrator and I can manage in the survey settings. I could set it back to the default. And then when I go in and I look, it's back again. Another reason that it is not fully secured, we talked about some of the options for dumping information out. If let's see, I don't think I can do it here. Let me Oh, wait, it's over here. Export to spreadsheet. Here, because I'm using Firefox, it won't let me do it. But if I go back to IE, I was just in the wrong screen. Export to spreadsheet. Enable. And that is just a security warning because I'm about to connect to a data source. And that may not always be a secure thing to do. But you can see here, it does show created by. It will show that whether or not I have selected the option for showing the users or not. So it's not totally secure. If somebody has the export to spreadsheet option, then they can have a problem with the anonymity. Not that big a deal if it's not a high priority that it be secure. I've seen a lot of people go to some fairly big extremes to get this not to log the user. The problem is, no matter how far down that path you go, if you have a determined enough IT person, they can probably find a way to track who it was. So it's going to be really, really difficult to get a truly anonymous survey, because if they have access to the server itself, they can go into the web server logs, look at IP addresses, all those kinds of things. So if it really, really has to be secure, this isn't your option. And really anything controlled inside of your environment probably isn't going to be a great option, because somewhere along the line there's going to be an ability to track down who posted what. So don't get too bent up about the fact that it's not super anonymous. If casual anonymity is good enough, then just go on with the features that you have available to you. One of the other things that you can do in the settings of the list is if you go to advanced settings, you can take the items from the survey out of search so people can't search for things. Hang on here just a second. Kevin just mentioned to me that maybe he could do an example of how to do this totally anonymously. Again, total anonymity being, sort of a misnomer if somebody were determined enough. I think Kevin could, come up with a way that in SharePoint it would be anonymous, but if Kevin himself was really determined, he could probably find a way around his own method using IIS logs or something like that. Matter of fact, I'm almost positive that he could. Am I right about that, Kevin?
Yeah, it's something that the SharePoint admin or anybody else within the SharePoint environment would not uh, be able to track. But yeah, if you went into the system logs and so forth, uh, and knew what to look for, sure, I'm sure it could be tracked down. It's not something I'd be able to do today. It's a fairly long demo, but
Oh, sure. Yeah.
maybe it's something I can, in a future uh, power hour, I can show how to do a completely anonymous submission form, which I've used for clients for anonymous feedback or suggestion boxes. Those things that people like to have so they can speak their minds and call their coworkers out on things, but they don't want to get caught.
Exactly. And so, I mean, Kevin has brought up a good, people do want those kinds of things, and it is possible with a little extra work. And as consultants, a lot of times, that's what we spend the bulk of our time on. We can show somebody this, but then they're like, oh, but can you make it totally anonymous? We can. It takes a little extra effort, but it's not impossible unless you want to really get down to sort of a system level where people can get to all of the logging. Then it's very, very difficult. Just like anything on the internet, total anonymity is a very difficult thing to do. Okay, so we can take the survey results out of search so that you can't look at the responses through search. We can allow people to create and edit all the responses, so they could go in and they could edit each other's responses. Or you can make it so that they can't edit any responses or just their own. You can make it so that they can only read responses by themselves. So if they responded, they can see theirs, but they can't see everybody's. And all of those are simple options that allow people to fill out the survey. They can go and edit their own result if they realize later that their favorite color is actually yellow. They can go in and change their response without being able to change everybody's response. There are a couple of caveats here. People have to have at least contribute permissions to be able to do the survey at all, because it has to save the information. So they have to be able to contribute to that list. There are a couple of ways around that, and that helps you with the anonymous responses. So I say that just as an out of the box kind of problem, but it's not really something that is an absolute rule that can't be worked around. There are some exceptions, but out of the box, you have to have contribute permissions. Some of the things that people do to get around some of the problems with this is they will set up workflows that will take the results from the survey and move them somewhere else where the users don't have access. Sometimes they don't even have read access, and then it will delete the original response. So their response is only in the survey for a minute before it gets moved somewhere else. Those kinds of things can be used for security to prevent any sort of tampering with the survey, and maybe that's the kind of thing that Kevin would cover in a future topic. If anybody has interest in that sort of thing, absolutely let us know in the comments of the YouTube video or in this Google Hangout so that we can know what kind of interest you guys have in this kind of subject. All right, so moving on from some of the basic functionality, I did mention the scaled question, so I just wanted to show you real quickly what that looks like. So I can go in and I can have a question where I disagree, I agree, I strongly agree, and I can choose to answer anywhere on that scale. And then I can save that, and again, I can dump that information out into an Excel spreadsheet. So that makes the information easy to process if you want to get some numbers out of it. It makes it portable. I can delete the survey, and then I've still got the results in a document somewhere. It makes things very handy, and it makes it really accessible for other purposes besides just looking at it in SharePoint. If I click Finish, show all the responses, view response 1, And you can see it's kind of shortened it. If you really wanted to, you could change the look and feel of all that, and that goes back to those kind of advanced things. I'm sure Ryan could spend a good week making all of this look exactly the way you want it to. It could have, heart-shaped box or circles here, and it could have pictures of kittens around it, and all of those things that you can kind of lose yourself in. But the basic functionality is here, just waiting for you to tap into it. I can view this in an RSS feed. You can see it's not real pretty here because it shows me, 3, 2, 4, and those are the numbers of the response. So it doesn't look exactly the same way. One of the problems with this RSS feed is that if you want to use the RSS viewer in SharePoint, it really has to be in the same site collection, because SharePoint won't let you do what is called a secured RSS feed, which is typically what these are unless you've put them in a site collection that allows anonymous access and all those things. So don't get too wrapped around, the functionality of like the RSS feeds or something like that unless you have a very specific purpose. It's not really just meant as a quick view. It's meant as a feed of data for some other purpose. If you want to dump things out into scale here, export to SharePoint, save, open. I don't know what happened there.
Open your Excel.
Yeah, I can't seem to get to anything. I don't know. Oh, there we go. On my screen, it was kind of frozen. And again, you can see here it's just got the numbers for the responses. So that's the basic functionality of the survey. One other option to look at, and this one can be a little more complex, and actually I'm going to go back to our front page here. I've just put these into a promoted links, and I've made it so that the survey comes up as a dialogue. What is my name? Stephen. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? And here we have the classic question: is it an African swallow or a European swallow? If I say a European swallow and I click next, it'll ask me another question. Yes, what is the airspeed of an unladen European swallow? And then I can finish and save that response. I apologize, my screen sharing is doing weird things today. There's a problem though. If I put in here Stephen, and I'll show you how I did this in a minute. If I do the African swallow and I click next, suddenly I get the question about the African swallow and I get the European swallow. I'll show you why here in the settings for the survey. I just made a mistake really when I set up the queries. What we're dealing with is what's called branching logic. So you can see here, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? I gave it two choices, and then depending on what the choice was, I made them go to another question. So if I had the African swallow, I went to the African swallow question. If it was the European swallow, I went to the European swallow question. The problem becomes, if I choose the African swallow, and I look in this list here, you can see the European swallow comes after. For the branching logic to work the way you want it to, a lot of times you need to skip all the other options. and you need to go to the last question. Otherwise, it will fall back into line with the question. So it does the African swallow, then it does the next question. So you'll have to be a little clever about how you order things if you want that to be the last question that someone answers. So you have to be aware of the fact that it will show everything after the one you branch to. So because there were no questions after the European swallow question, that's the last one. It skipped that question. So you will have to pay attention to the order of the questions and how you've constructed your branching. Otherwise, they will just fall right back into line, and you don't really need to branch at all. So the branching logic is handy, but it can get a little bit complicated. So just be aware of it. The way you do branching logic, so if I put a question, question, and I have a number. Also notice, I apologize, like my screen is not updating well. Okay. You can see here, I can require an answer to that question, which means they can't finish the survey without answering that question. I can enforce unique values, so I can say it has to be between a certain set of values in some cases, or if I choose this one, I get different choices for each one of these. So each option has some differentiation in terms of how it's presented to the users. I can do calculated values with the dates. I can do friendly formats. I can change whether it's date and time or just a date. So all of these have their own options. And this isn't really unfamiliar. If you look at just standard custom lists in SharePoint, a lot of the construction is the same. The way that single lines of text, multiple lines of text, choices, all those things work are pretty standard. The rating scale is pretty unique for the surveys. You don't see that all over the place in SharePoint. So it was the one that I wanted to show you specifically. But some of these other options are available to you in different areas of SharePoint pretty commonly. Anyway, so if I am trying to choose something, I do a choice, it has a menu already. You'll see to define branching logic, add your questions, and then the survey settings, edit the questions to define the branching logic. But if I cancel that and I go back to one of these, now I have branching logic. It's because I have questions after. So I need to define the questions that will come next before I can define branching logic. Otherwise, nothing really shows up down there. So you will have to put in all the questions that you want to branch to before you try to do the branching logic. So it's really best to kind of sit down maybe with a piece of paper and figure out exactly how you want the survey to work so that you can order the questions appropriately. Just a sec here. All right, so that is the basics of the survey. Like I said, this wasn't a really long presentation. I just wanted to kind of take you through the different available options straight out of the box. And you can stretch it a little further, but it's easy to get yourself into trouble or to start causing problems. You can do anonymous setups where you have a page that has an anonymous survey in it, but it takes quite a bit of work. And like Kevin said, it's kind of a process of its own. It's not something that you would just jump into casually. So make sure that you really do need that advanced functionality. If you just want something so that people can choose whether you want cake or cookies at the next party, and you just don't want everyone to know what everyone else is voting for, the options I've shown you should be plenty good. If you want to do, say, a survey about management performance, however, You may have a manager who has broad control in SharePoint. They could go in, they could look at who posted what comments, and that could be problematic. So that's when you would go to those more advanced anonymous options. But just be aware the simple options that are here, it's generally a pretty attractive format. It's generally a pretty attractive format. It's easy to do. A lot of the options for moving this stuff around would be way too advanced for the likely usage of some of these surveys. So I wouldn't get too concerned about the look of them until it becomes super important. And that may be when you explore like survey apps or something like that, because it would be more flexible for a broader range of use. But if you just want something to collect some information in SharePoint, the survey option is a great one. And I recommend that you kind of toy around with it a little bit in a test area of your farm and get used to some of the options that we didn't really go down the path of, because there are a whole bunch of them there. The managed metadata, some of the options around the dates, pulling information about people into the surveys, all of that stuff can be really useful. But just keep in mind what the end goal is before you try and extend it too far outside of the options available by default. And then keep an eye out for any future power hours that we may do. If you want to get into some of the advanced functionality, absolutely leave us a note. Tell us that you're interested in it so that we can do something in the future that will cover the kind of needs that maybe you have versus some of the basic stuff that we've covered here today. I'm trying to bring up the Hangout here. So do we have any questions at the moment?
I haven't seen any questions show up, Stephen, but I did want to comment on your branching logic. That,
okay.
One thing to remember there is that you can only choose questions later. You cannot go back in the question order for branching logic.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, so that means that you really can't do looping or go back and ask questions because, for other, even if you need to ask the same question multiple times, you'll have to enter it multiple times and really, as you said, plan out your logic, and maybe even with every question, choose what question to go to next after you get them all written out. I mean, it can really take some planning to get a complex survey, but you can really create something here that is as complex as any SurveyMonkey or any other third-party survey vendor.
Absolutely. And I mean, if it's worth putting in the extra effort, the survey function can be stretched in a lot of different ways. But if you just want something quick and easy and you want all of those options of changing the look and feel and anonymity, that may be when you want to use an app that's designed around surveys, because it'll be a little quicker and easier. But just like anything in SharePoint, you can change the look and feel of it. You can reorder things. You can do some clever things to produce that anonymity. It's just a matter of how much time and effort you want to put into doing it inside of SharePoint, or maybe just farming it out to some more specialized tool. All right. If we don't have any other questions, I think we'll go ahead and end the presentation for today. I hope this was useful to everyone. Don't forget to leave comments in the YouTube channel if you have any future questions about it, and we will try and pick those up as time goes on, and maybe we can do some more advanced functionality around this or other SharePoint features that are more basic, but that can be used in an advanced way with just a little extra work. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.